Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening to the viewers all around the world. Welcome to Plain Talk Tuesday night edition. We are joined tonight, our guest tonight is the former Pro-Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. He's the former principal of the St. Augustine campus, former Minister of Government, a current Member of Parliament, Dr. Bhoe Tewarie. Did I leave anything out?
Well, it doesn't matter. That's good enough, I think. That's fine.
Yeah? Introducing you is a lot. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for introducing me, and thank you for having me as a guest on your show. I appreciate it. And
Dr. Tewarie.
go ahead.
No, you continue.
No, I was just going to say good evening to your listeners and viewers.
Dr. Tewarie, you are very, very well known. Your name is a brand in and of itself in all of the different capacities that you've been in. You are currently a Member of Parliament for Caroni. Is it Caroni?
Caroni Central, yes.
You have advocated in when you were a government minister, you were the Minister of Planning, yes?
That is correct. Planning and Sustainable Development.
What was the Sustainable Development addition to planning? What was its specific goal?
The Sustainable Development part of the Planning Ministry was to orient government policy and action towards the 17 sustainable goals of the United Nations. Now, at that time, those goals had not been set up. And through the Ministry of Planning, we worked with a range of public servants and other stakeholders in the society to try to address what might be the sustainable issues that Trinidad and Tobago would be concerned about. And we, in fact, identified those things and presented them to the Rio Plus 20 conference in Brazil. And we have a document to that effect. It still exists. And on the basis of that, we went through a series of consultations, including with the UNDP and the United Nations system, and contributed, in fact, in a constructive way to the development of those 17 goals that are now world goals for every country.
So they're enshrined at the UN level?
Yes, they are. Yes.
So we're not just signatories, we're the author of the document?
No. We were a contributor to the document and to the definition of some of the goals. They did not take everything that we proposed, and of course other countries proposed many other things. And in the spirit of compromise, the 17 goals that seem to be the most reasonable and achievable and sustainable and desirable, those goals were identified and approved by the United Nations Assembly.
Would you be able to mention some of them offhand to me? Like, what do you think that were the specific goals that Trinidad and Tobago was focused on from a sustainable development point of view, and what did we lose? What did we have to compromise?
Well, I don't think we had to compromise anything, but being small islands, of course, like many small islands, sustainability was important to us because climate change is an issue. It affects our coasts, it affects our climate. We are an area that is affected by hurricanes and strong winds with the potential for tsunamis. So many of the things advocated by small island states that have to do with responsiveness to climate change and also with developing small island states in a context in which there are many challenges for them. Those were some of the things that we advocated. Other issues related to and remain they remain goals have to do with education, because education is such a platform for development. It is
Correct.
not just physical development, it's human development. So many of the human development issues also were strongly advocated by us, and we support in the sustainable development goals the environmental conservation issues, because without that, especially being a country that wants to evolve tourism and allow it to contribute more to the GDP, and we are also an oil producing country, a gas producing country, the environmental and conservation issues were also critical. The other issues were women's issues, to ensure that the gains that we've made in terms of women's education, in terms of fairness in employment, all of those things, I think, were things that we advocated that remain goals in the system globally, and that were strong things that we identified with as a country.
While you were minister, did you have the opportunity to guide forward any of these items on the local level and to get us on street with pursuing these goals?
Well, we had to account for certain issues that had been pledged by an earlier government, to see how we had done on things like poverty and poverty eradication, see how we had done on gender-based issues, and see how we had done on the issue of economic sustainability of the vast majority of citizens. And we did measure, do the necessary research within the public service, and we accounted for that and presented a report. I think Mrs. Bissessar, at that time as Prime Minister of the country, presented the report at one point at the United Nations, together with other things that you might have done there.
Some of the issues that you raised touch on poverty and at the lowest level. In Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of our poverty has been pegged to white-collar crime, corruption at the public servant level, and the drug trade. Were any of these things specific subsects or focuses of these go-forwards in view of trying to curtail the things that interrupted and prevented the development of people at the lowest level that you just spoke about?
Well, what we had done, I think, in 2013 through the CSO is that we had done a survey together with the UNDP of quality of life issues and family sustainability issues and poverty-related issues throughout the country. And we did that by regions. So we would have done it for 14 regions in Trinidad and for Tobago.
So regional corporations?
We didn't do it for the corporations, we did it for the regions.
But was it guided by corporation?
It was guided by the boundaries of the corporations. So for instance, one of the areas in which we found the highest level of poverty and unemployment was in the Mayaro area. And on the basis of that, a second area was ironically Point Fortin. And when you think of Mayaro, where you have BP, when you think of Point Fortin, when you think of, and you think of it as a oil and gas producing area, you have Atlantic LNG there. Those two areas turned out to be the areas with significant poverty in terms of stress levels, and also large numbers of the poor in terms of the numbers. There were other parts of the country. We did what you might call, what in fact was called a Human Development Atlas. And that Human Development Atlas showed Trinidad and Tobago, and then showed in each region of Trinidad and Tobago how well or how poorly people were doing in terms of human development requirements. How much schooling people got, how much crime there was, how much unemployment there was, what were the means of livelihood, those kinds of things.
So this is like a quality of life index.
Yes.
When you identify the criteria though, because I guess we would agree that the circumstances impacting the Diego Martin Regional Corporation would be different to what was impacting Mayaro, the lifestyle, the historic choices that are made. So you say BP and Atlantic LNG, but unless BP and Atlantic LNG hiring 20 and 30,000 people, there's still going to be a lot of people that are looking for a way to have a meaningful income and a quality of life on their own. What did we identify as reasons for, in a country that has budgeted and spent a little under $1 trillion in 58 years? What did we identify as the reason for the stunted development in some of those communities?
Well, I think that, I don't know if it was done in that document, because that document was more descriptive, trying to appreciate and understand and give an idea of what was happening in each part of the country so that it could inform policy. But if you ask me that question though, what had happened is that, I think happened is that successive governments might have spent money on the wrong things, might have allocated monies which did not have the kind of human development impact in the communities. We did not have strategies that went beyond macro strategies, because one of the things we learned there, and one of the things I tried to do, was to create the conditions in which, in various parts of the country, you created poles of growth, in addition to the fact that you had a macroeconomic strategy or plan for the country. And what you did in those poles of growth is that you would try to identify what is the anchor industry in that particular region. And let's say in Point Fortin, it would be Atlantic LNG. You would identify what were the industries that were connected to that as part of a cluster. And then you would identify the sub-industries in there. And you would try on a regional basis to see how you can stimulate growth and entrepreneurship and involvement of the population from below, even while you had a macroeconomic strategy for the whole country. But we did not get a chance to really implement those things. We did not have enough time. But I still think that there's a lot of merit in looking at a strategy for development in that way. You have a macroeconomic plan for the country based on a budget year by year, but you also have regional strategies that look at regions as poles of growth and then try to solve the problem of jobs and income, entrepreneurship, new business creation, etc., in those regions.
What I was going to ask you while you were saying that is we seem to be focused on income generation as opposed to income creation. I want to come back to that. But you said that you built your polls based on a macro view of Trinidad and Tobago. What was that view, or is it solely based on the budget, and that budget solely based on the energy industry? So without one, the other falls and everything falls from there.
No, well, during our time, we had a medium-term development plan. And we had priorities identified for that medium-term development plan. And the first priority was really the human development issues. But if you develop people by sending them to school or giving them training or giving them an education or sending them to university, you have to have industry. The public sector will absorb some, but you have to have industry beyond the public sector to be able to create employment and to absorb them. And that means that you had to create the conditions for private sector growth and development. You had to create the opportunity for entrepreneurship and so on. So the idea was that with the growth poles, you'd have what we identified as economic development zones. Now, that's an idea that has been continued by this government, in which they basically have economic zones in which people will come in with particular types of industries and so on. And that would help to develop the country in a regional way, but also contribute nationally. And we also had something called, we tried to promote a lot of new entrepreneurship. And we did that by something called the Idea to Innovation Program. And people would put in their ideas, a judgment would be made, and between Nehurst and Kariri, the Council for Competitiveness and Innovation, they put together a program that would not only give a grant. At that time, I think it was up to $250,000 to the entrepreneur, and that grant would then be used with the guidance of Kariri to try to create businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. Some of them were successful, some of them might not have been as successful. We also worked to get a $4 million grant for small entrepreneurs from the World Bank. That is $4 million US from the World Bank, that would focus on climate change and sustainable development related businesses and investment and entrepreneurial ideas. We try to do things like that. A lot of the success that you see now that is taking place in terms of cocoa is based on a lot of the research that was then done by the Economic Development Board, which did a study of the cocoa value chain in history and the cocoa value chain now, and what we needed to do to be able to capitalize on the cocoa industry. The problem is that we have an economy that was dominantly led by, first of all, oil, and then oil and natural gas, and then dominantly natural gas. And because we ended up with a dual economy that was one energy-based, and then the rest of the country that was basically made up of services manufacturing, construction, other things in the system, you had this dual economy developing in such a way. You asked the question about poverty, so that the income levels in the energy sector were much higher than income levels in other sectors. And with that evolution, you had a situation in which really the creation of businesses outside of the energy or related to the energy sector was really very limited in the country. At the
Why?
present time,
Why?
sorry,
Why was that
because
so?
because of what people call the Dutch disease, which is to say that when you have energy rents come into your country, and the rents then allow you to finance the whole rest of the economy, then the entrepreneurial opportunities in the areas outside of the energy sector are not as attractive, because the country doesn't need that kind of entrepreneurship, or it does not need to diversify with a sense of urgency, which it does not, perhaps it did not need to diversify with a sense of urgency. And that, of course, limits the entrepreneurial intervention and the new business creation.
If
We
I
are
could
in a
interrupt you,
situation,
if I could interrupt you for a minute. If I could
yeah,
interrupt you for a minute, I would like to propose that they change the name from the Dutch disease to the Trinidad disease, because it
well, in a
seems to
way,
have affected us. It seems to have affected us worse than anyone in the world in history. Our
it,
country is broken, in debt, nothing works. We have nothing to show for our development. When we contrast and compare ourselves with countries like Singapore, that has no oil, no gas, relies only on service, as you mentioned, service industries, their economy just eclipsed the United States of America as the most competitive economy in the world. They half the size of Trinidad and Tobago. They compare and peg to Qatar and Luxembourg. We look at Dubai and those experiences, and then we look back at Trinidad and Tobago, and for all the oil and gas we've ever had, all it seemed to have done is facilitate the creation of mega millionaires and nothing else to show for it.
well, I can't disagree with you on that. I really think that the Dutch disease has had a devastating effect on Trinidad and Tobago and its economy and our ability to diversify. And we are in a situation now in Trinidad and Tobago where we have about 26,000 businesses, just under 27,000. About 2%, maybe just under 3% of the employment is in energy. About 7 or 8% is in manufacturing. Another 2 or 3% is in agriculture. And over 80% is in the services sector in Trinidad and Tobago.
Does that
So all
include CPEP and URP?
well, yes, they would be counted in the services sector as part of
So what
as part
percentage of
of
that percent? So what percent of that percent is make work schemes?
I don't know offhand, and I don't
Kid
want to
Rowley,
give you the wrong figure.
Kid Rowley told me that CPEP and URP cost the country $1 billion a year. $1 billion a year. I don't know how we could count our low-paid make work schemes among our service industry when, again, I want to return to Singapore. Their people's salary per capita is higher than the United States of America right now.
Yes.
We what we are calling service, that should be delinked and called make work and handout. We need to have fact, and I'm saying this to you as a former planning minister, because I know that you did a lot, and people are asking me where could they get the atlas and all the documents that you're referring to that you compiled, and if you could give us that information during the show at any point in time, because they'd like to follow up. Because Trinidadians want to know, at some point, was there even an attempt at a vision for this country?
No, during our time, we did have a vision. I mean, we had a medium-term plan. We had budgets that were based on that plan. We had a monitoring and evaluation unit that gave 4 consecutive reports to Parliament during the time in which the budget was presented. We have never had that done under this government. So it stopped with our time, and we measured what we did. But the atlas, by the way, should be on the website of the Ministry of Planning. I don't know, I haven't checked recently. Or if it is not there because it was a CSO produced document, it should be there. Or if it is not there, it should be on the website of the UNDP, because the UNDP did it in partnership with the CSO for the Ministry of Planning. So what you are saying is true, Philip. We do have, a lot of money spent on make work, you're right, on creating employment in order to give people incomes. And we do have a situation in which a lot of people are on welfare. And what you do need, and this is what we have to think about now, we are in a very, very deep crisis right now. And what we have to think about is how do we reconfigure this economy to make it an economy that is really a thriving, productive, competitive, income generating, job creating, export oriented one.
I love any terms,
And
but I'm thinking where you're going. Loving the terms, but I'm thinking where you're going to find the silver lining in all of that. We have a post-COVID-19 economy. The economy is, for all intents and purposes, shut dead. We don't know where we're going from here post-Petrotrin shutdown, the price of oil collapsing through the floor. The Heritage and Stabilization Fund has been looted. The government still, Vision 2020 and Vision 2030 aside, still have no vision at all for the country. The Prime Minister told his followers that it is impossible, that's the word he used, to diversify this economy, and that we don't have enough land for agriculture. So what do? Where is the silver lining for anybody sitting down telling me, Philip, post-coronavirus, the world is going to change and we're all going to sing Kumbaya? What are we going to use as a justification to sing Kumbaya if kitchens and cupboards are empty?
well, we've reached to this crisis point now, and in a way, that unfortunate situation has given us an opportunity, and I'll tell you what it is. Because hunger is at our door now, because food on the table is a problem for large numbers of people,
Exactly.
because businesses are in a state where a significant proportion of them are facing potential collapse. They may never recover. You have an opportunity now where, because the pain is already so bad, because the pain is
So
already.
we've inflicted more pain. We're inflicting more pain. They're talking about $50 million injections into Caribbean Airlines. For what? They didn't tell us how Caribbean Airlines would benefit, how Trinidad and Tobago would benefit, how we would ever get that money back in any way. So why waste that $50 million? Wouldn't it make more sense to leave the Caribbean Airlines planes grounded for a while and let other people bring people to Trinidad and Tobago when we finally do open the borders? It seems that we're not thinking, we're just throwing money at institutional things to say we have this and we have that. But nobody is saying this is the plan going forward. So in other countries, and I just want to say this to you. In the United States of America, there are people at the entrepreneur level talking about the coming boom because they know that everywhere that something vacates, something else must fill the void. Nature abhors a vacuum, as you know. So if that would happen in Trinidad and Tobago, if somebody could say that all of our institutional assets and skill sets could be redirected and redeveloped in this direction, and we could work with countries in doing these industries or in some way to get us an income generation, a plan, a goal, a target. The 23 people that the Prime Minister put together on a committee, and I was going to ask you, were you invited to be on that committee? And if not, why not?
No, I was invited by Minister Lee Hunt, but I suggested to them that the Prime Minister write directly to the leader of the opposition, and I simply left it there. The end result of that was that the leader of the chief whip of the UNC in the parliament, as David Lee, wrote to Minister Lee Hunt indicating that, look, we have a plan of our own that we call the master plan, and we are going to send that to you. And we had originally asked to be part of a bipartisan committee that was not honored, and therefore we will not basically not send anyone, but we will give you our plans and you can use that as you think fit. So yes, I was invited, but the situation is one in which I will not be serving, and that does not mean that I'm not going to be contributing, as indeed I'm doing now, to this conversation. But I want to say something, Philip, which is that, you see, unless the thinking changes and unless we understand the meaning of the crisis that we are in, we are not going to be able to fix our
Thinking
existing.
Dr. Tewarie, sorry for interrupting you again, but you say unless the thinking changes, and I can't let brilliant guests like yourself leave gaps in the conversation for the onlookers who may not have the rest of the information that you have in your head. You said that unless the thinking changes, the thinking at what level? The national level or the leadership level?
Well, it has to start at the leadership level. And that has to become an example so that the change in thinking permeates. And you have to people together behind a vision, understanding the context of man. I mean, we have a situation where the first thing we have to deal with is survival right now. That means survival of people, from hunger and from food that I mentioned. They don't have income, businesses difficulty. So that first part is survival. The thing is that you have to try to restore the existing businesses you have to the extent that they can be restored. And that is what the phase opening up is about. We will see how successful that is as we look at it being managed. Then those businesses that are opened up are going to have to cope with recouping and retrieval. They are going to have to retrieve what they have lost over the last 5-6 weeks or whatever it is. They are going to have to recoup, and they are going to have to try to put their businesses together. It is that will partially contribute as they get back on their feet to any recovery or recovery plan that we have. But that old economy, given what is happening with oil, given what is happening with our revenue, given what is happening with the environment and consumers and people buying, spending their money and so on, that economy cannot get us to recovery.
Exactly.
And that is where
you just said exactly the point.
No, but let me say this two things. So what you need in a in addition to trying to get those businesses beyond survival to restoration and to retrieval and recouping, and to get them to contribute to economic recovery, you have to have an economic restructuring and diversification agenda in a very, very fierce, premeditated, and organized way. And you have simultaneously to start building a new economy. So that you have to try the best you can to retrieve the old economy and do the best you can with that. You have to start the economic restructuring process and intensify the diversification. And you have to start the building of a new economy. It's the only way it can be done. And ironically, the restructuring and the rebuilding of the new economy actually starts with food security.
Dr. Tewarie, you said three things, right? You said phased reintroduction of the existing economy, which you admit cannot work, like clear defense line communities around Petrotrin. If that doesn't start back up, all those businesses, they either repurpose or they die. So our economy now has now become a bigger version of what happened to the communities around Petrotrin with the collapse of the oil and gas sector. We also have the issue of not being able to feed our people because there is no consumption data, there is no adequate land use policy, there is no respect for the farmers. We have no plan where food self-sufficiency and food independence is concerned. And I asked, from the moment you announced that there was a global pandemic that could, if it accelerated to what they assumed it was going to, could have interrupted food supply chains, we should have started the process of growing food immediately. And we still, on the 23-man committee, there's nobody there talking food self-sufficiency and food independence. So when you tell me that the main mission is to diversify the economy fiercely, I have 2 points for you. One, we couldn't manage the whole economy. And two, nobody on that committee are people with vision for tomorrow. Those are all people with visions for yesterday, and they want to go back to business as usual.
I don't want to get into that, but I will say this to you, which is that
but you could just tell me who on the committee has that vision. You could just tell me who anywhere in the government, which member of the existing government that has lead, because you don't have lead right now. You could make suggestions. But who in the existing government or that committee has the capacity to be talking, this is a way forward for Trinidad and Tobago?
No, I think you're right about that, because the last 4.5 years has shown we've had 18 consecutive quarters of economic decline over the last 4.5 years, or 4.5 consecutive years of decline.
And when you have global economy grew, 2 of those years, the global economy grew at an astonishing 3.5%, except Trinidad and Tobago.
So there was a problem of effective management and effective policy pre-COVID. And that is why it is difficult to say in the COVID period that we are going to have effective management and effective policy. And that is why I agree with you that, let's say we had funds to spend in a COVID situation with all the protocols, and after 12, 15 months we had a vaccine. I don't see how this government, which has led us quarter to quarter in recession and 4.5 years of depression, and is uncertain about the survival period that we have now with the instance of COVID. I don't see how they are going to get us through another year or another 2 years or another 3 years or another 4 years or another 5 years. So that is my assessment of the inability of this government.
That is your scary prognosis, and I asked you earlier, where is the silver lining? Because I can't find one.
No, but you must listen to what I'm saying on the positive side now. Because we are at ground zero, because there's so much unemployment, because there are so many closed businesses, because the oil sector has collapsed, and because the gas sector is weak. With all of that now, we've got to build the new economy, and we have to restructure away from energy. So this is the time when we could look at what we can diversify in. And that's why I said we can begin with agriculture, because if you begin with agriculture, you kill two birds with one stone. You begin to address the issue of imports and self-sufficiency. And at the same time, you address the issue of foreign exchange savings. All right, so that's one thing. The second thing is that you have agro manufacturing that exists here, and proper linkage with existing agro manufacturing and agro processing, and the creation of a climate of agricultural production expansion could lead to more investment in these areas related to the agricultural sector. Now, in later times, that could be linked with the school feeding. It can be linked with tourism. It could be linked with entertainment and so on. But it is the beginning of a process. But this is also the time to respond to something like climate change and begin the work that is required to deal with a climate change vulnerable country like Trinidad and Tobago, like all the countries in the Caribbean. This is the time to take custodianship of the environment so that we can create industries and employment in those areas that add value in the long term. This is the time when we have to get the Internet of Things kind of mentality and structure at the center of the economic system, because this crisis has shown us which social distancing and so on, and people not being able to get to work, that the technology is the place and the platform that you have to go in order to deal with business in the future. Once you do that, you've got to begin to address the issue of artificial intelligence and what of that might be applicable in Trinidad and Tobago for new industries. You've got to deal with the renewable energy issue. You've got to deal with renewable industries issue. So what I'm saying is that's why I said you've got to alter the thinking. If we begin to think not only of how to get back to normal, because we can never get back to normal, but we understand that the traditional part of the economy is only about survival, restoration, and recoup and retrieval. If we understand that, then we can design a recovery strategy of which that is part, but really addresses the issue of economic restructuring away from energy to the things that I mentioned, intensely focused on diversification, and we can start to build the new economy on a platform of ICT technology.
Dr. Tewarie, when you say those things, it sounds so rational to people less than 30 years old. But anybody that's above the age of 40 knows that in the 1980s, the world had an energy recession, and we learned from that energy recession to move away from it and to diversify into all of these things. Some countries went with tourism, some went with manufacture, some went with services. The King of Saudi Arabia said the oil price can reach $1, it doesn't matter to them. The economy is not standing on one pillar anymore. We've been saying these things for decades, for absolute decades. And I just want to say this thing to you, that you just said that this country, we dealt with 4.5 years of recession when there was a global boom. The rest of the world was growing at 3.5%. It was unprecedented. That was the word that they used, 3.5% for global growth. And Trinidad was left behind. Our parliament became non-functional. There was nothing that you or the opposition could do to rein the government in. And at the end of it all, you say that post COVID-19, we now know. I put to you that I was telling the government a decade ago, build the jails outside the court, you'll save the $80 million we pay to amalgamated security every year. But it's not just this government, it's not just this government that ignored it. And it's not just this government. And I want to say to you that you were the Minister of Planning. And I think that you are a brilliant mind. Were you ignored? Or was the whole government based on studies and no action followed through?
No, we did things. We did things. We one of the few. No, it's a legitimate question. I was just thinking of how to pull together some of the things that I want to tell you. One of the things that we did, for instance, in the energy sector, well, the first thing was to get the energy sector going, because there was no drilling for an entire decade before we came. And we were able to get the drilling going by inviting bids, the end result of which is what has really given us the revenue during 2017, from the third quarter of 2017 to the present time. But we also got an investment that brought together Mitsubishi, NGC, and Massey, that would have taken the gas downstream, not just into methanol and DME, and that plant was about to be open about now, but also take it into gas-driven manufacturing. And that is why Massey came in, because they were interested in the manufacturing part of the operation, not in methanol or in DME. We did a number of things to enhance the diversification. I mentioned the growth poles issue, I mentioned the economic zones issue. But we also we also dealt with a lot of social infrastructure. Remember, what we did was we built the South Campus. And when this government came in, they just did not open it. They've started the reopening. They started the opening now. Remember, we built the Couva Hospital. But for 4 years, they did nothing. And when the COVID crisis came, they suddenly opened it and used it as a center.
And the hospital doesn't help us diversify the economy, and I want to keep it.
I'll tell you why. Because the Couva Hospital was a state-of-the-art center, and you see the government talking now about UV in it, and that had the potential for basically creating a health sector that could import patients and treat them properly. Okay?
Medical tourism.
Yes. The second thing is that we had plans, for instance, for the Tobago Hospital, which was built by the Manning administration, which we completed, which had to do, again, with educational and health tourism, diversifying in the tourism services sector. Now, but it does not, in a sense, given what has happened with COVID, make sense to cry over spilt milk. I think we have a crisis of unimaginable proportions here. And that crisis is going to be exacerbated by the fact that we are going to end up with a world recession. We might very well end up with a global financial system that is overstressed because of all the money that has to be used to save the business and to save jobs and to give people income and to save economies. And we already have a supply chain disruption and dislocation. And with the geopolitics that is going on now in the world, we are going to have complexities and uncertainties of a kind that we have not seen for a long time. In that situation, we have to manage our own little crisis in the world, but big crisis for the 1.4 million people who live here. We've got to allow people to feed themselves. We have to allow their children to get an education. We have to look after their health. We have to create the conditions where they can earn an income. You can only do that by creating businesses, by having opportunities, by making investment, etc. So that is what I'm saying, is that the pain is already here. Everybody is feeling it now, and they are going to feel it more as time passes. Let us bite the bullet and do
us?
what is required. Our country.
But Dr. Tewarie, we just watched a government who is the leadership of us ruin the economy. Coronavirus is the icing on the cake. Our 4.5 years of recession, depression that destroyed our economy, we were already in dark and murky waters. So when you say us, I am looking around to see in a system that allows us not to get the best and the brightest working at the problems. I look at a system that allows the politically connected and the deep-pocketed to get control of the country and turn our people into consumption and labor. Again, you as a former Minister of Planning, I want to ask, did it ever cross your mind to decentralize the authority of the cabinet back to the 41 constituencies? Wouldn't it have made more sense? And now, at this time, wouldn't it make more sense to give autonomy to the 35,000 people living in each constituency and give them support? And let the best and the brightest at the ground level rise up and give space and support to the redevelopment of Trinidad and Tobago?
The Prime Minister at the time asked me to prepare a bill to provide direct constituency support to cause development to happen in the 41 constituencies. And I prepared that bill, which would have given $10 million a year to each constituency. So in a 5-year parliamentary period, each parliamentarian would have been able to account for the expenditure of $50 million for development works in his constituency in consultation with people.
Why not use the THA budget model? We give Tobago $2.5 to $3 billion a year and give $5 and $10 million to the constituencies. Why didn't we diversify and decentralize? Why did we decentralize education, healthcare, public utilities, public works, even security back to the constituencies at budget level every year? Give them the $400 or $500 million that they need, approve it, pay the checks through the Chancellor of the Exchequer, through Central Bank, pay the checks so they're not getting the money that they could squander, but base it on management of individual economies of scale lower to the level where it actually meets the needs of the constituents. Why did we do that? Why must so much of it be centralized?
No, it's not centralized. It's gone to the constituency, 41 decentralized constituencies. In addition to that, the whole growth pole structure was supposed to be related and connected to the regional corporations and also to the local, it was called LED, Local Economic Development Strategy, where we had entered into an arrangement with the Canadian body for collaboration in order to get this thing done. And these things were supposed to work in tandem with each other and to proceed. But when we brought the bill to Parliament, it was opposed immediately by the opposition at the time, this government now, and we never got to do it. But as I said, all of these things, in my view, I mean, we can argue about them, we can quarrel about them, but we are living with a crisis now, Philip. This is what I'd like to say. And when I say we, I speak as a citizen and I speak as a member of Parliament. I speak as somebody who has been in government before. I speak as somebody who feels that we need to change this government to have a new government that will then be capable of implementing something. But I think that there is something larger which I want to raise with you. I have filed a private motion with the support of the leader of the opposition, in which basically we want to address this issue of how do you get a national plan that is bipartisan in nature and that allows a government, opposition, and the stakeholders to do that national plan, and you have national buy-in. And as far as the policy is concerned, you have both government driving it and opposition support, together with the stakeholders who participate. And you can quarrel about a million other things, but you do not quarrel about the policy because you've agreed on it. Huh?
No, I just want to say, if you're talking inclusion, because we don't yet have proportional representation, I think it would be selfish to assume that the PNM and the UNC alone represent the people of Trinidad and Tobago. 50% of the people vote between the PNM and the UNC, election come and election go. There's a whole set of Trinidadians and Tobagonians that are not in the process because they feel that they don't have a voice in those two parties. So if you're going bipartisan, let's go further. Let's find a way to bring all of the people who represent people, all of the people who have political movements and political voices, because there are other ideas that could help. Right now, the opposition has been relegated to a political party that just have front row seats in the parliament. This government will take you all on. And the system shows that all you could do is cry foul. But there's nothing you could do if the Speaker of the House says, no matter what you want to debate, it is of null and void importance to me. What does that tell you? That the entire system is broken unless you are actually in charge of the cash register, as Lloyd Best used to call it. You have no authority. So if you're going to say, let us get all the good people together, then I suggest to you that maybe you go back to the opposition leader and tell her, include all of the people who also work hard at trying to bring leadership to the country so that all the people of Trinidad and Tobago can be represented in the conversation.
I think that's a valid point. It's not a point that can be ignored. I think it's legitimate. So I don't have a problem with that. But I had a point there I was going to make. It just slipped me as I was listening to you because I was trying to follow your
about the opposition leader was going to promote the bipartisan plan where everybody would come together and discuss.
It's a whole range of stakeholders, but I think we need that. The challenge for us is how do we get a national policy and everybody, even if you disagree with some little things, you agree with the direction, with the vision, and then you can argue about how you implement the little pieces, etc. And I think we need to get to the point in Trinidad and Tobago where we can do that. And I am saying, Philip, that if we do not find a way of doing that now, you see, I don't think even with the crisis, people understand how grave this crisis really is. If you have a 10% collapse of existing businesses in this country, you are going to lose 2,600 businesses. If you have a 15% loss of jobs in this country, in addition to the loss of jobs pre-COVID, you are going to have an additional 93,000 people unemployed in the country. So knowing that that is what we are facing, I don't feel that we can avoid action and intervention now. We have to have a strategy for survival, for restoration of what is possible, for recouping and retrieving what is possible, for starting the economic recovery, for basically starting the economic restructuring and diversification, and finally, for starting to build a new economy. And we have to do all of that simultaneously. because you cannot sequence that. It'll take 2 decades. You have to do it all at once in a very smart way, in a united way, with leadership that cares and leadership that knows and leadership that can assert the will of leadership that connects to the will of people to get the job done. And I think that that is the missing ingredient in our country. I'll be quite frank with you. I think it's really critical.
It is the issue. That is the issue.
You will agree with me on that.
When you say we, every time you say we, I want to interrupt you and ask you, who is we? Because I know that you have a vision.
When I say we,
I know you have a big picture vision. I know that. I know when you speak from a big picture vision. And then I also know that you are well schooled in the art of compromise. And along the way, we set out to grow a tree and we end up with a weed at the end of the road. We, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, when you say we, I want to think that we're talking to 1.4 million of us. You recognize the power of technology?
We the people. We the people.
Okay. So let's agree that our system of government has failed. Let's agree to that and look to how we could have a conversation with all the people, because Dr. Tewarie, we could look for all the spit, duct tape, and WD-40 we could find right now if we don't reboot Trinidad and Tobago and redevelop it from the ground up.
Reboot is a good word. Reboot is a good word.
If we don't do that, because I think that yeah, we could get ourselves out of the rain and we could feed ourselves for a couple of years, but if we don't have a vision for a new Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, we're not going to go anywhere. There are people, I want to say this to you, leadership. The parliament costs us $100 million a year. Leadership would have been, during the coronavirus, for the parliament to say, we take a 50% pay cut, because that's $50 million. And that could go towards this and it could go towards that. Again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but to the people who are jaded with politicians, they're looking for grand gestures and big ideas. And I don't think that's what we're getting yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, leadership is at once real and symbolic. I agree with you. And many of the things that you have to do as a leader are specific and tangible and must be focused on getting very, very tangible results. But some of the things are symbolic, and I do agree with you that these things are important. And my own feeling is that this crisis time should really be a time when we should get together to address the issue of solutions for the country, because we have a party system, we have partisan politics. I belong to a political party, the UNC. The structure of the country is one in terms of political participation in elections, that we have seen certain patterns over the history of the country. That is true. But that does not, in a crisis situation.
Give them your conclusion. When you say that you see a pattern and it is true, what is that pattern you've seen? Because again, Dr. Tewarie, you have a lot of unfinished sentences. And I know you have all the thoughts in your head, but there are people looking on that want to be guided by those thoughts. So when you say that our history of voting has shown a pattern, what is your takeaway from that?
Well, the history of voting has shown a pattern where it has been very difficult to move out of ethnic patterns of voting. But I think that we have made strides. I mean, the NAR would not have been possible to get into government, I mean, if people did not cross barriers. I think I think Mr. Pandey would not have become prime minister in 1970. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the year. He would just before Mr. Manning, he would not have become prime minister. I think it was 1997. Yeah, he would not have become prime minister, even though he had to form a coalition. He won 18 seats in Trinidad. And he would not have become prime minister if people had not crossed the barrier. In 2010, the People's Partnership would not have been in office if people had not crossed the barrier. So at the same time that you say that there is, I think that political parties in the past that emerged and may not have gotten a seat, but they got significant support, those that would have not emerged if people were not willing to cross the barrier. So I think we have to ask ourselves, what is it in the politics and the psychology of the population that creates the conditions and the climate in the country conducive to a unification of people behind an idea or a movement or a political concept and party? Because it has been done before. And it means that leaders have to rise to that challenge to make it possible. It means that the institutions have to be configured in such a way that you have comfort. You give the people comfort so that they feel comfortable and they feel attached and connected. And I think on top of that, you have to have a plan that is clear, that shows people where you are headed, how we're going to get there, and how they are going to be included in the process and reap benefits in the process as we go forward. Because I want to say one of the dangers of this COVID crisis, if we do not manage it properly, is that all the money on the government side to deal with this crisis and its consequences is going to come from the multilateral agencies as they are coming now, from IDB, from CAF, from World Bank, etc., and they are now talking to the IMF, etc. And what you have is a situation where the government has become big government, all right, this sitting government, the People's National Movement with Dr. Rowley in charge. It has become big government, but it does not have money except for the money in the HSF and in the foreign reserves, which are very limited and could end in 6 to 8 months. And the only way you can get this economy going is by private sector confidence and private sector investment. In that situation with big government, private sector, and multilateral agencies propping the government up to continue to govern, to have peace and stability, you can have in this country, in this crisis, COVID, two things that this country does not want: an entrenched oligarchy and a growing and widening equity gap between the rich and the poor.
But that's what we are.
No, well, it is not as bad as it will get.
You have a sitting attorney general who is renting buildings to the state.
Yes, I know that. We've talked about it. We've fought about it. I mean, but as you say, Parliament is not the easiest place to deal with these things. But what I am highlighting here is the danger of an extreme situation of actually, worsening situation of financing the creation of an oligarchy and in the process widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots, which in the long term will be detrimental to.
Right. Again, the statement is factually correct, but you can't point out that as a problem or a plan without identifying at least what would be in as short a way as possible, away from further creating this oligarchy of contract mafia, political financiers, unethical professionals, corrupt politicians. I mean, we've created a monster, Dr.
Yes,
Tiwari. The people of
yeah,
Trinidad and Tobago,
in a way.
people of Trinidad
We've
and Tobago
created an
trust no.
explosive.
Go ahead.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
The people of Trinidad and Tobago trust no organization of state. They ridicule the president. They have no idea what the Senate is for. The parliament seems to be neutered, non-functional. It creates an opportunity for somebody to win, first past the post, romp away with the treasury for 5 years. We couldn't even do a simple recall law that would fire those who were breaking the rules or breaking their promises. The system of government is, and while what you're saying is a fact, and I tell you, every point you made, you're spot on, but the things, and I think the order of things is what we're missing. And I think giving Trinidadians the ability to fire the government now is the most important tool we could give them so that they could rebuild trust. I think decentralizing the authority of the cabinet back to the constituencies so they could feel like they're part of the decision-making process again, I think that's important.
And to the regions, you need to bring the regions into the process, not just the constituent. Yes. Decentralization is an important strategy of democratization. And once you centralize power and you disempower the people, and decentralize brings government closer, and it gives you the opportunity to exert a certain amount of control in the communities in which you live. And I mean, those are important strategies. These are important strategies of the UNC. You know, the UNC has very, very strong strategies related to these things. I just want to share that with you. You know,
Dr. Tiwari, it doesn't have to be adversarial politics. We can all speak, but for some reason,
I do not believe in adversarial politics.
And that's why I could say that to you. I could say those words to you, but I'm telling you that our politics is adversarial. It does not lend itself. It doesn't lend itself to this kind of conversation. You've done in a little over an hour.
It is very adversarial. It is very divisive. It is very combative. The tone is wrong because it's a tone of disrespect.
Yes, exactly. It leaves everybody dirty. It's like wrestling with
the tone is a tone of disrespect. You start with that. And, you know, I think something is wrong with that. And this is something, I mean, if you follow as much as you are distrustful of it and resentful perhaps of its evolution, you will see that from the beginning of the process in 2017, 2018, I raised issues about this, you know, speaking and saying, you know, we cannot conduct business like this in the parliament. We cannot have this adversarial tone. We cannot have this kind of disrespect for one another in the parliament. But you know,
Dr. Tiwari, you were the pro-vice chancellor of the University of the West Indies. You were the principal of St. Augustine campus. You could have led. You could have led the but you could have led the conversation between two. You could have led the conversation between 2010 and 2015. I want to say to you, what the Speaker of the House is getting away with now is part of our system. That should have been changed. Why wasn't that changed? Why weren't these things that make government so unresponsive to the public, why weren't they fixed? We need government to come to office and say, listen, learn to enjoy saltfish and rice fowl while we're going to fix everything, and then we're going to start to make money and we will go forward. We won't end up here ever again. Because I don't think that the solution is to run down looking for money now. And I hear you talking about incomes, and it is important and we all want money. But I grew up during the big recession. I was talking to a businessman this morning who is a regional, if not global player. And we both agree, if you came of age at a time when you knew how difficult it was to get a $20, you have a healthy respect for $20. We in Trinidad, we treat our money, we treat the treasury, we treat the equity of this country like it has no value, it has no purpose. Now, again, I'm not putting that on you. And you've been here for much longer than the hour that I invited you for, and you gave us a lot of information. And I want to thank you for that. Someone told me that you must strive to be a gentleman, a scholar, and a giant among men. And I think you're well on your way. So I want to say,
You
I
are
want to
very
say to you,
kind, Philip. Thank you.
we have to
Yeah.
have more of these conversations. All of us, Dr. Tewarie, we have to have more of these conversations. And for your closing comments, we tell everybody, take as much time as you need.
No, I won't take a lot of time. What I would say is this, eh? The world is getting much more difficult to navigate with or without COVID, and certainly it will be like that during the period until we get the vaccine, and even after we get the vaccine and people are vaccinated. You have major geopolitical shifts taking place now, and that is going to intensify. It's going to be a very, very complex world out there. And I want to say this to people, and what I'm saying here, I'm saying sincerely from my heart. This Trinidad and Tobago is the only country we have. I am not saying that lightly. I am saying that this is the only country I have. I do not have a passport for another country, nor do I desire one. And I've given all of my life here. I've had generations of people before me in my family, and I hope we will have generations here after me. And this is my place, this is my country. And I think people in Trinidad and Tobago should feel like that about their country. The people in Finland built Finland. The people in Singapore built Singapore. The people in Sweden built Sweden. So did the Americans, they built their country. So we cannot expect that somebody else will come and build our country for us. We have to build our country ourselves, and we have to lead the building of that country, even if we invite people with skills and talent and finance and so on to come and help us. Because the world is a big place, and you don't know everything. And innovation thrives because people come together and talk, and they get ideas, or they do things together and so on. So we need to do that. We have to love our country, and we have to care for it. And that means the environmental part of it too, the custodianship of it. And we have to come together and unite in order to rebuild, reboot, I like that word, and restructure this economy and to build a new economy, because we cannot survive on the old economy. The oil and gas economy is no more. The fluctuating price of oil went in April to minus 40. The 40 US dollars. The prospect for the next 3 years at best is $40. That is the range of fluctuation of oil. The situation, you have a soft price there. We have 6 plants closed in Point Lisas. If you check ArcelorMittal, there are 5 others that are gas-driven, gas-based. And we have this COVID crisis now with an economy that we are trying to put back together, and unable to survive on that old economy with the price of oil and with the production of gas and the price of natural gas, and the entire industrial base of the country with gas driven facing collapse in the country. And therefore we don't have a choice. There is no choice. It's not that it's an imperative. We will not survive if we do not do it. So we have to survive this. We have to retrieve and recoup. We have to try to get the businesses that exist already and are trying to get back on their feet to recover as best they can, to create some jobs and so on and get the economy going. But that will not bring the confidence nor the growth, nor the expansion, nor the recovery that we need. We have to restructure away from energy in the new directions that the world is taking with ICT based development, with food security, with climate change consciousness, with environmental awareness and custodianship, with a path to sustainable development. And we have to build a new economy based on the technology and linked to artificial intelligence, and a strategy for that in the context of our own local environment and pace of development. If we do not do these things, our children will have no place here. This will become what has been described, what was described in the 1930s as a backwater. At that time, it was described as a colonial backwater, but we will become a backwater. We will have no place. It is possible that you could end up here, if we did the wrong things, with a small oligarchy, large numbers of poor, a dwindling middle class. So we must come together to save this country. And I am saying, let us put our national foot forward now. If you think that this government has done well in the last 4.5 years, that they are managing COVID well, and they will be able to manage for the next 5 years, well, then I must say that I disagree with you. I really think that they have mismanaged things badly, and I don't think they could manage the future. And therefore, I think we need change, and we need a change of government. I don't know how political configuration is going to be in the future, but I do know that the UNC is a party in parliament which, if it did not stand up, the government would have walked all over the people of this country. The last was this thing with the Venezuelan visit of the vice president and the oil and the sale of fuel from Paria to what seems like the Maduro government, either directly or indirectly. And I am saying that, look, we cannot get by on the basis of wrongs. We cannot get by on the basis of lies. We cannot get by on the basis of incompetence and mismanagement. And we cannot get by on the basis of corruption. And I feel that we have to take a step up now. We have to put our country first. We have to rise to the challenge. We have to have clean government. We have to have good governance. And we have to have a clear strategy and plan for helping this country and its people to recover, to find their way, to restore themselves and their families, and to begin to design a future that is desirable for them and their children. And that would be my final thought and my final plea. And I want to thank you, Philip, for giving me the opportunity uninterrupted to say what I just said. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Dr. Tewarie.
Yeah. And I would be happy to come on the program anytime, sir.
Well, I want to say this to you based on what you just said, because this culture of all inclusion and everybody speaking because of now, I think that you're spot on with something, and that conversation needs to happen. And I hope we all get to a place where we understand that the people looking for leadership that understands that it is more than big boss thing, and all of us could come together with the country first. You're very correct, and you're spot on with that.
The country first and respect for one another. Those two things will take us back.
Indeed.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for joining us. And that, Trinidad and Tobago, was our conversation with Dr. Bhoe Tewarie. He was the former Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, former Principal of the St. Augustine campus. He was a former Minister of Planning, and he is a current Member of Parliament. And a lot of what he spoke about tonight are spot on. You've heard it here a lot over the past couple months as we brought critical thinkers night after night after night to you, for you to hear that there is a way forward. Partisanship and adversarial politics, corruption politics, tribal ethnic politics have done us wrong. 58 years, $1 trillion budgeted and spent. We can't account for. I would love to see the Paria fuel balance sheet. I would love to see the Lake Asphalt balance sheet. I don't know where to turn to get that. We live in a country where we have systems that are systems in name only. These things all have to fix. The Speaker of the House shouldn't be Lord of the House. The Director of Public Prosecution should have a responsibility to update the public as to what investigations are at what stage, so we know that we're not just a country where criminals and corrupt, they get to act with impunity and time pass and we forget. We've done that for too long. It hasn't worked for us. We're broken. We're broke. We're in debt. We're turning to places like IMF. I mean, none of this is good news. And what I could tell you is this: Trinidad can be fixed. It can still be fixed. It could be fixed fast. All of this, where there is hope, there is life, and there is opportunity. And we could, if we wanted to, make ourselves a better version of ourselves. Tomorrow night, we have Dr. Raghunath, political scientist. Let me get his actual designation. Bishnu Raghunath, senior lecturer and political scientist. He'll be joining us tomorrow night. And the Progressive Empowerment Party has some questions to ask about the politics, past, present, and the way forward in the future. Thursday night, we have former senator and well-known criminal attorney Wayne Sturge. He will be joining us. Friday night, Devon Maraj and I am going to attempt to wrap up the entire week and review everything that went on and take it apart and dig deep on a lot of issues. You need to be informed and you need to be educated. This might feel like homework sometimes, but it is important so that for you to empower yourself come election time, you need to make your voting decision based on fact, based on reality. Let us move away from this politics of divisive, ethnic, tribal nonsense that at the end of the voting day leaves all of us with nothing to show. Anyway, it's been a long show tonight, and I really do want to thank Dr. Bhoe Tewarie. He was very forthcoming and gave us a lot of information. And we're working on our guests for next week. We have some surprises for you. One might be a foreign leader that may be joining us in the conversation, bringing more information to you and people that we should be doing business with as an independent sovereign nation. We talk that a lot. We don't know what it means. Let's get it down on paper. So until tomorrow, stay safe, Trinidad and Tobago.